There's a cafe near my house that I go maybe once or twice in 2 weeks. Last month I walked in, and before I'd even sat down or ordered anything, I'd already worked out which table had the best light. It wasn't the most comfortable table. It was the one where the light came in from the side at about 4 in the afternoon and made everything look perfect. I sat there, I didn't take a photo. I wasn't planning to take one either. But the part that stayed with me wasn't that I'd done it. It was that I'd obviously been doing this for a long time, and that was the first time I had ever actually noticed myself doing it. So after that, I started paying attention. And once you notice something like that, you start seeing it everywhere. You order something, it arrives, it looks good, and obviously you take a photo before you eat it. I do it too. It's a nice plate, so you take a picture. Nothing happens, right? But then you start moving things around. You turn the plate slightly because the light is better from that angle. Move the fork because it's sitting in a shadow. Shift the glass because it's blocking something. And then you take the photo again. At some point, you're not really photographing your food anymore. You are arranging it so that it looks right in a photograph. I started noticing the same thing at concerts. You look up and there are hundreds of phones in the air, and people aren't just recording a 10-second clip to remember the moment. They are filming entire songs from beginning to end. Watching the concert through the same screen they are going to watch the recording through later. And apparently, most of those recordings never get watched again, including by the person who took them. I went on a trip this year and came back with a balance of photographs and a lot of memories. And I'm really grateful for that. But after that, I couldn't stop finding examples of it. Like, for example, we log the books we read, we rate films before we even finish thinking about them, we map our run so the route turns into a little shape on a screen, and photograph sunsets while they are still happening. We even end up choosing cafes because they look good rather than because the coffee is any better. Billions of photographs are taken every day, thousands are being taken every second. You've probably got hundreds of photographs sitting on your phone right now. But how many of them have you actually opened more than twice? Now, I know what you're probably thinking the problem is, because it was the first explanation that came to my mind too. I thought it was social media. We do all of this because there's somewhere to put it. Instagram exists, so we make things that look good on the app. And if you take the app away, surely we'd eventually go back to just eating our food without thinking about how it looks, right? And it isn't even a stupid explanation when you look at how much the physical world has changed around us. There are cafes with one corner that has all the good lighting and the nice mirror, while the rest of the room is basically an afterthought. Restaurants are designed around how the food looks in a photograph, and there are entire spaces in museums and tourist attractions that seem to exist mainly because people want to stand in front of it and click a picture. Places are being designed to photograph well, and that didn't happen by accident. So that was my answer, and I was fairly confident that I'd found it. Then I went and looked at how much of this actually ends up online. Somebody studied thousands of photographs taken from ordinary people's phones rather than the camera rolls of influencers or people who make content for a living. Only about 6% of them had been shared anywhere. So roughly 93% of the photographs people were taking never became posts, stories, messages, or anything else that another person would see. They just stayed on the phone. And then it got stranger. In another survey, around 80% of people said they had photos and videos sitting on their phones that they hadn't opened even once since the day they took them. So maybe we are not taking all these pictures for other people, but we are apparently not even looking at most of them ourselves. That's when I found the thing that actually broke my first explanation. A psychologist at Fairfield University took a group of people around an art museum and asked them to photograph some of the objects while simply looking at the others. Afterwards, she tested what they could actually remember. The people who had photographed the objects remembered fewer of them and fewer details about them, and they were even worse at remembering where the objects had been inside the museum. There was no Instagram involved, nobody was posting anything, and there wasn't an audience waiting to see what they had taken either. There was just a camera, a person, and something to worth looking at. And that left me with a problem. If we are not doing this for anyone else, and we are not necessarily even doing it so that we'll remember the moment later, then what exactly am I doing when I walk into a cafe and immediately start checking the lighting of the cafe? So if it isn't really about other people seeing what we do, I started wondering if maybe it's about something much simpler. Maybe we are just getting worse at experiencing things because we know we can always save them. I found a study from 2011 that had nothing to do with Instagram photographs or social media. Researchers gave people a bunch of facts to remember and told some of them that the information would be saved on a computer. The others were told it would disappear. When they tested them afterwards, the people who thought the information had been saved remembered less of the actual facts, but they were better at remembering where the information was stored on the computer. Basically, their brains had worked out that they didn't need to carry the information anymore. It was somewhere else. And that idea has a name. It's called cognitive offloading. The more I thought about it, the more the camera roll started making sense. I have hundreds of photographs on my phone, and I couldn't tell you what half of them are. but I know they are there. I don't need to remember the sunset because I have the sunset. I don't need to remember what the restaurant looked like because I have 12 photographs of the table. At some point, taking the picture became a way of telling my brain, you don't have to keep this. And my parents never really had that option. They had a limited roll of photographs. And if somebody's birthday was happening, you took one or two pictures. You didn't take 70 because you knew you could sort through them later. Because the film back then cost money. Getting it developed cost money. And if the picture came out badly, that was it. You had to decide what was worth keeping. Now there's basically no cost to keeping anything. Take the picture, record the video, save the screenshot, keep the receipt, bookmark the place, add it to the list. You can keep everything. And for a moment, I thought maybe that was the whole thing. Maybe we haven't become obsessed with documenting our lives. Maybe we just got really good at telling ourselves we don't need to remember everything anymore. But then I remembered the cafe. But the cafe did make me think of something else. Maybe the problem isn't that I'm taking the photo. Maybe it's that I've gotten used to seeing things as if I might. I have spent years looking at photographs, watching people travel through photographs, watching restaurants get reduced to a few good angles, watching someone's entire day become a 30-second video. And after enough of that, maybe you don't need to actually post anything anymore. You just start looking at things from the perspective of someone who could. I walk into a cafe, and before I've even decided whether I like the place, I'm already noticing which table looks good on camera. I go somewhere beautiful, and part of my brain is already thinking about where I'd stand if I wanted to film it. I see a good meal, and I don't just see the meal, I see the shot. And that's the weird part. Nobody asked me to do any of that. There's no audience sitting there waiting for me. I could leave my phone in my pocket and nobody would know, but I still see the place differently. Maybe that's what social media actually changed. Not what we do with our experiences, but what we notice in them. Honestly, that felt pretty convincing. But then I started thinking about the things I do that don't make any sense, if that's the explanation. Because I'm a content creator. Of course, I think about shorts. That's literally what I spend my time doing. So maybe the cafe thing is just me. Maybe I've trained myself to look at everything that way because I spent half my life turning things into videos. Except I've caught myself doing it when there's nothing to make too. I'll walk into a restaurant and notice the lighting before I've even decided whether I like the place. I'll hear a song and immediately think about what kind of scene it would work in. I'll see something funny happen between two people, and my first thought is sometimes that it would make a good clip. And then I'll realize I'm not filming any of it. I'm not posting it either. Sometimes I'm not even taking a picture. And it's not just the obvious stuff. I can be watching a movie and suddenly notice a short composition instead of just watching the scene. I can be traveling somewhere and start thinking about where I'd put the camera before I've even properly looked at where I am. I can sit in a cafe, put my phone away, and still find myself checking which table has the better light. That's the part I couldn't explain with the audience theory. Because if nobody is watching, there's nothing to perform, and if I'm not even recording it, there's nothing to remember later. So, why am I still seeing the world that way? And then I realized something that made me uncomfortable. I spent this entire year trying to become better at turning ordinary things into something worth watching. And I think that's what started bothering me because I don't think I'm consciously performing for anyone when I do these things. There's nobody sitting across me waiting for the perfect shot half the time. There isn't even a camera involved. I just spent so much time thinking about what makes something worth filming that I've started noticing those things automatically. The light, the angle, the moment, the thing that could become a story later. And maybe that's what this whole thing is. Not that we are constantly trying to impress other people. Maybe we have just gotten so used to looking at our lives from the outside that sometimes we forget what they look like from the inside, which is a particularly stupid thing to realize while you're making a YouTube video about it. There's another reason this has been bothering me though. I'm probably one of the worst people to be asking this question. I'm trying to build a career out of making things people want to watch. I spend hours thinking about hooks, thumbnails, shorts, titles, what makes someone stop scrolling, what makes someone keep watching. I'm literally making this video because I thought something I did in a cafe was interesting enough to turn into a story. And the annoying part is that I don't think any of that is necessarily bad. I actually like making things. I like filming things. I like editing them. I like taking something that happened to me and trying to turn it into something that another person might care about. That's the whole reason I'm doing this in the first place. So I don't want this to become one of those videos where I tell you that social media ruined everything and we should all throw our phones into the ocean. I'm not going to do that. I wouldn't even want that to happen because some of the best things I've experienced recently are things I ended up filming. Some of the people I've met came into my life because I was making something. Some of the places I've gone to, I probably wouldn't have gone to if I wasn't looking for something worth making a video about. So creating doesn't just take things away from the experience. Sometimes it gives me the experience in the first place. And that's what makes this harder because the problem isn't that I make things out of my life. It's that I don't know when I'm experiencing something and when I'm already thinking about what I can make out of it. I've started noticing that difference now, and once you notice it, you can't really pretend you don't. I went back to that cafe a few days ago, same places, same tables, around the same time, and I noticed myself doing it again. I looked at the light, looked at the tables, and almost immediately started thinking about which one would look best on camera. And for a second, I actually started looking around for the shot. Then I realized I wasn't filming anything. I wasn't even planning to film anything. I was just doing it because that's how I'd learned to look at the place. So I did something that felt surprisingly difficult. I stopped looking for the better angle and just picked a table. I sat down, ordered my coffee, and left my phone in my pocket. And nothing happened. The cafe didn't suddenly become more interesting, or I didn't have some profound realization about life. I just sat there, drank the coffee. I don't think the answer is to stop taking photographs or stop making videos. I don't even want that. Some of the best things in my life have happened because I was trying to make something out of them. I just don't want to reach a point where every experience has to become something before I can enjoy it. I still don't know exactly where that line is, but I think I'll notice when I cross it now.